There are certain things that happen in life you simply do not forget. I'll give you three of mine real quick. The day I graduated high school, what a relief. The day I learned to wipe my own butt, what a relief. By the way, these aren't necessarily in order. And the day I opened up an Xbox One game case for the first time to see that the game discs are no longer on the right side because, get this, they're on the left. Now that's what I call personality. Among the ranks of the Nintendo 64's controller, the Sega Dreamcast's VMU, the Virtual Boy's, just the entire thing. Call us crazy, but we gamers like our different consoles to be different. Otherwise, what's the point? Of course, being different is no guarantee we'll like it, but many of us would still prefer to see consoles at least take that chance rather than play it safe, which is why when I opened that Xbox case, well, it wasn't nothing. Even with the adjustment period, it was worth it. After all, Xbox and PlayStation have been accused of being too similar to each other for a long time. Not that there aren't indeed some differences between the two. For example, Xbox is called Xbox and PlayStation is called PlayStation. But many of us would like to see them be even more different from each other than they are. Yes, you'll find games that aren't on both platforms, they have different controllers and services offered, all that jazz. But if you'll allow me to slip into my I love the 90s pants, we can see that things have changed a lot from how they were. The Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, arguably the fiercest console rivalry because of how different the consoles were from each other. If you look at the game libraries for each system, besides a ton of exclusives for each console, when it came to big IPs that were represented on both systems, each system often received its own different game, and in a lot of cases, even when the games were called the exact same thing, they'd be totally different games made by different developers. Not to mention how different the hardware for each console was, which would make all the games for each system inherit a little bit of its console's flavor, whether it be the drastically different sound hardware or the company's feelings on red blood compared to purple blood, or excuse me, purple ooze. Nowadays, if you look at something like the Xbox Series and PlayStation 5, the overwhelming majority of each console's game library is the same, with of course exclusives like Spider-Man here really sticking out. If you own a PS5 and like to post Xbox bashing comments online, it's gonna be really convenient to like Spider-Man. That said, I think it's important to point out that game library parity could be considered a good thing. If most games can be played on multiple different platforms, a number of benefits comes from this. More opportunities for game developers to make money off their games, especially understandable for indie devs, and more opportunities for everyone to play the game. As great as it makes the Super Nintendo to have so many exclusives, not owning one as a kid deprived me of the chance to play all the bangers like Super Black Bass and Super Black Bass 2. Naturally, the console makers don't really care if everyone gets to play every game or not. It's buy our console or cry me a river. Rumor has it the Yellowstone River was actually created in the 90s by kids who didn't get a Super Nintendo. But the actual game developers do care if everyone can play their game or not, because they obviously want to sell as many copies as possible. This is what creates the perpetual battle for console makers to secure exclusives. It's not always in a game developer's best interest to have their game's availability be limited. When a game isn't exclusive, there are indeed some exceptions, but it typically happens one of a few different ways. The console maker owns the developer, is the developer, or offer to pay the developer for exclusive rights, even if for just a bit. Something that does happen every now and then, and something that typically doesn't make gamers smile. Now, call me crazy, but I feel that Nintendo, being first and foremost an actual game company, has always given them a natural advantage when it comes to the whole make your own exclusive games thing. Fans of Nintendo have no doubt been waiting for the Switch to be mentioned mentioned in this video. After all, when it comes to Nintendo, whether you love them, hate them, love to hate them, or hate to love them, one thing that almost everybody can agree on is that they're different. Whether they're different in a good way or bad way can vary from person to person, and even within each person, it can vary from console to console. Nintendo consoles have more or less always had personality because Nintendo has always been willing to try different things. When they fail, they get criticized heavily for it, and when they succeed, they get copied. Sounds like a fair deal to me, and heck, sometimes they even get copied when they fail. For anyone who remembers the days of the Wii U, then like me, you remember that these were dark days indeed. Despite some folks enjoying some of the games, Nintendo Land ride or die, baby, there was a lot of frustration surrounding the console. Some owners of the Wii U were even having interventions held for them by their friends. It was ugly. Some people said Nintendo should stop making their own consoles and just make games for other systems. Then, when the Switch was announced, you had a lot of people saying it was going to fail big time. I don't think it's possible for a statement to have been more wrong than that one. Maybe when I said my days of crushing an entire bag of french fries in the middle of the night were behind me. As of this video, the Switch is on pace to be maybe the best-selling console ever. So even if people want to say they hate it, it was still a massive success. But where Nintendo has experienced both the highs of taking a chance and succeeding, as well as the lows of taking a chance and failing, Sony and Microsoft have typically had a more steady, even-keeled approach. Make a fairly straightforward console that's fundamentally more powerful than the last one, and seemingly more and more similar to PCs, then get as many third-party developers on board as possible. And don't get me wrong, this has been a really successful strategy, especially for Sony. It just starts to get a little predictable, and for some folks, stale. As much as the Wii U got bashed, there was still a ton of intrigue and curiosity for what Nintendo's next console would be, because people knew it would be decidedly different. Nintendo's consoles certainly all look different, that's for sure, and while somebody could say that the design and name of a console doesn't really matter in and of itself, I do find the names of consoles, as well as their design aesthetics, to be indicative of how the console makers are trying to brand them and what type of experience they're pushing for the console to provide. With PlayStation, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, this is still PlayStation, but just the next one. Although, as large as the PS5 is, I will give it credit for how different it looks, and as always, props for the air purifying function. With Xbox, you almost wonder if they want you to think their console hasn't changed at all. Yeah, we moved some X's around, but don't worry, it's still an Xbox, a continuation of what you already know and are comfortable with. But then take a look at something like the Dreamcast and how it was branded, with the idea being games that you would dream about, or something along those lines. Cast your dreams. Well, this actually tied into Sega's philosophy with the console, as what they essentially did at the time was divide up their best internal talent into a handful of dev teams and said, alright, make whatever games you can dream up, giving them all permission and encouragement to be creative. And it shows in the games and ties into the overall brand of the console. Some might say that a console doesn't need a unique identity and that creativity can just come from the games themselves, but I believe that creating an identity and brand for a console can influence what type of games developers want to make for it. Just ask Rareware when it came to the Nintendo 64. To me, that's what makes fans of a console become so devoted to it. Its unique identity. I mean, Dreamcast even had a game where you can yell at a fish. Where are you supposed to get that kind of experience today? I've tried some alternatives, but it's not the same. Nowadays, budgets for games have become so big and take so long to make, at least if we're talking about the big AAA games, that you can't necessarily take as many risks, or at the very least, I think it's very believable to think that certain studios choose not to. And luckily, sometimes it's not necessary, with something like Spider-Man having enough opportunity for creativity already built into its universe, but where the heck is the spin-off game where you play the entire thing as Aunt May? It would be devastating for a team to work on a game for years, only for the game to flop. Now, before I wrap things up here, I think it's important I clarify that this isn't me saying all modern games are bad. There's a lot of them that I do enjoy playing, whether it's on a Nintendo, Sony, or Microsoft console. This video is just a critique on an area of modern consoles that I'd like to see more from. More personality. And heck, for some of you, you may not even care if a console has personality. I mean, reliability and consistency can be virtues. You like your consoles like you like your plungers, reliable and dependable. Imagine if in a do-or-die situation, you went to grab your plunger and grabbed this. Well, hey, it's got personality. Also, I'm sure some of you may disagree with me about which consoles do and don't have personality. That's all well and good. You're one of many people, opinions are going to vary. But with that, I would be curious, as always, to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's